Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Saints Insider Podcast. Monday, July the 22nd. It is football time again. Saints training camp starts this week. We're here to preview it for you before we send these boys out to California for basically a month for Saints training camp. I'm Zach Ewing with Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Matthew Paris, here to break down training camp and preview the 2024 Saints preseason right after this.
Football fans, with the Caesars Sportsbook app, you can be in the game all the time. Seeking instant action? Quick Picks offers you the most popular games and markets, already built for you and ready to bet. Experience the thrill when you stack your bets to create a super parlay. Build bets for your favorite teams and players across multiple games. This season, don't just watch the game. Download Caesars Sportsbook and experience the game like never before.
All right, so training camp week is finally here, guys. We've made it through the offseason. Tell your friends it's football time again. It's time to listen to Saints Insider. Share the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We appreciate pretty good audience growth through the offseason, and so looking forward to a great 2024 season, at least in the YouTube channel. We'll see about the field. See how that goes.
Control what you can control.
That's right. That's right.
110%.
One day at a time.
Every day. 1% better every day.
Living in the moment.
That's right.
And the moment right now is that Luke and Matt, you guys fly out to training camp tomorrow, and Rod, you're a couple days after that, and then Jeff Duncan will be there later. Norm, our producer, will be there to produce some videos later, and we're going to have the whole crew out in Irvine, where, Luke, what, 76 degrees right now?
Yeah.
78 degrees?
Real quick check of the weather here, because I'm obsessed with this, and I can't wait. Currently 76 degrees. Here's the highs for the next 4 days. 82, 83, 82, 81. Baby.
Ocean breeze, no humidity.
I don't know if we're going to get ocean breeze. We're a little bit far inland, but, far is relative here. We're going to be like 2 miles away from the coast.
You get a breeze 2 miles from the ocean.
Yeah, we'll see.
A little bit.
We'll see.
It reminds me of the West Virginia temperatures from a few years ago when the Saints were out of town. That's how it was.
I mean, it'll be the coolest Saints camp since at least then. Yeah.
Well, plus Matt's going to be there. It's going to make it double cool.
No, well,
when he puts on his sunglasses.
The sunglasses over the glasses.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that by the time Dunk gets out there, he's going to be like speaking a little French.
Right.
Maybe wearing a beret.
Bring us some baguettes.
Jeff is in Nice, and then he's coming back for like 2 days, and then he's going to Spokane for an event with Steve Gleason. And then he's making a pit stop. I won't tell you where. That's a surprise. And then he's going to meet y'all in Phoenix for the first preseason game.
Yeah. Renaissance man.
So seriously, some frequent flyer miles for that guy. All right. Practice each day is going to be at 9 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Central Time. So we're talking like right now it's 11:30. This is the time that practice will be going on. So it's going to be in the 70s. Is there an advantage to that? The Saints don't have to sit through the humidity. They get to be outdoors every day. I mean, we've talked about this before with California, but just from an overarching perspective, do you guys see any advantage to the Saints being out in California for a month?
I see a huge advantage for me personally. I won't have to like change clothes 3 times in a single day. Going from the 95 degrees, 100% humidity outside to the Saints media workroom, which I'm grateful for this, but 62 degrees maybe? It's like frigid in there. I get like a case of pneumonia every training camp. No, what I will say about this, and I think this is the biggest benefit, is that, and Dennis Allen's alluded to this, we've seen it with the Saints team in the past, they get a chance to just bond with one another for a month. And, there's no family distraction. There's no go home and make dinner for the kids, which is great. I'm going to miss that with my own kid, but this is really an opportunity for this team to get really close, develop really good chemistry. They are only going to have themselves out there. I think that's the biggest benefit to spending a month away from home.
Yeah, go ahead, Rod.
Like I said, I think back to the time when Hurricane, was it Ida?
It was Hurricane Ida, yeah.
Yeah, and the team, they moved from here to Fort Worth and practiced at TCU. And I think even that time, you could just kind of see the team seemed a little closer. You're around each other all the time. I mean, it's not it's not any of that leaving the facility and going home. I mean, you're with your teammates the entire time. So I do think that's definitely going to help this team a little bit anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that translates onto the field, but I think it does, produce some camaraderie.
It definitely helps. Like obviously having a good team is better, right, than having a really close team. But we saw that in Ida. They started 5-2 that year before Jameis's injury. It kind of derailed the season. We saw it in 2019 when they went out to the West Coast. Drew Brees gets hurt against the Los Angeles Rams. They stay in Seattle for a week. They get really tight. Teddy Bridgewater takes the entire team out for dinner, says, "I'm the guy." And then they ripped off, 5 straight with Teddy Bridgewater, a quarterback, while Drew was hurt. So we've seen it in the past with this team. Obviously, it never worked out with the teams that went to the Greenbrier, but those were not as good of teams. So, if this team is any good and it also can develop that sense of camaraderie, I think it'll only help.
Yeah, I think of the off days. I think their first one is Sunday. They have one every 5 days or so. And, Matt, like you're either going to be sitting in your hotel room or you're going to go do something with teammates. There's not a lot of in between. And the leaders on this team, guys like Derek Carr, Demario Davis, have shown that they want to be with teammates and they want to bring these guys together. So I think we will see that.
Yeah, and the Saints have spent a lot of this offseason trying to build that camaraderie. And, they've been having this competitive session before practices every day where they're playing sort of different games. Like they played Family Feud the one day. They've done go-karts, spelling contests. They've really tried to amp up their days with some sort of competition. And I'd be interested to see whether that continues during training camp. I think it will, but they've just tried to go about this offseason differently. And part of that change is just kind of becoming closer as a team and getting everyone to buy in. And I think traveling away for training camp is a way for that to happen as well.
Yeah, and that's a good teaser. We'll talk more about the story Matt wrote about Dennis Allen and how he's kind of a changed man. You can check it out in Sunday's Times-Picayune Advocate. Also, it's on NOLA.com as of this morning.
Sunday is in this past Sunday.
Yes. Last Sunday. Yeah,
if you can find a copy of the Sunday edition, it's in there.
But NOLA.com/Saints, always a good bet, too. And I'll put the link in the description of this podcast. But it's a great read, and we'll talk more about how Dennis Allen, I think, is at least trying to be a changed man. And hopefully that will change things, he hopes, for his team, too. So let's transition a little bit from the big picture stuff, because that's always a chicken or egg thing. Are the closest teams the best teams, or are the best teams just the closest teams because people enjoy winning? Let's talk about the guys on the field. So, top position battles in Irvine. I think there's 3 obvious ones I put on the graphic here, but I'll let you guys talk about them individually. Rod, which position group are you most looking forward to kind of seeing duke it out?
I don't know what's on the graphic, so.
Well, hopefully we're thinking of the same things, but I'll fill in if not.
And I was going to actually try to go outside the box a little bit, so it may not be on the graphic.
Right.
But I was going to say, and I don't know if it's the most interesting, but I'm just going to throw it out there because I let Luke and Matt take the other ones. But I was going to just say the wide receiver, the third wide receiver position.
Ding on the graphic.
Oh, it is?
It
Okay.
is, yeah.
All right.
This spell has a special
But
purpose.
yeah, I mean, we know Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed are, the 1 and 2 guys, but who's going to be that third guy? A.T. Perry showed some good signs during minicamp. Cedric Wilson's probably, he's a veteran guy that's played a lot in Equanimeous Brown, whose name I just butchered.
EQ.
Yeah. And I'm going
You
to
came
You came close.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a Saint in there, though.
Oh yeah, it's like yeah. But anyway, I think those guys are kind of vying for that third spot, and the Saints need a third receiver, so we're going to have to see who it's going to be. And I think every practice is going to be critical to solving that one.
Yeah, I mean, for an offense that I think wants to spread the ball around, could be a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that wide receiver battle is, if not the most important, it's one of the most interesting on the team, because you could see it going any number of ways. There's a big gap between Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave and the rest of the receivers on the roster. And I think it's really just a flavor of what they're looking for there. Do you want somebody who's going to be important as a run blocker? I think that's going to be really important in this scheme. I think A.T. Perry is probably a little bit behind there. But if you want somebody there who's going to be a dynamic pass-catching complement to Shaheed and Olave, I think A.T. Perry makes a lot of sense because he's a bigger body in those two. He's got a different type of skill set. And you could see him taking a significant step in that role. Cedric Wilson, I think he's got a pretty safe roster spot. He's the only free agent they signed this offseason to more than a 1-year contract. He's going to be on the team. I don't know what his role is going to be. I think EQ St. Brown had a really strong offseason program. I think Mason Tipton, the wide receiver from Yale, undrafted wide receiver from Yale, they really like him. And he could have a special teams role. And then, we haven't even gotten to Bub Means yet. They're, 5th-round pick this year? So, I mean, there's a lot of guys vying for that kind of undecided roles.
Stanley Morgan also, who we didn't
Stanley
see was
Morgan.
hurt. Sign out.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think he's going to be like a number 3 wideout for him, but like the new kick return rules make special teams really, really important, and he's a standout special teams player. I think he could earn a roster spot through that.
Related story, as NFL teams start training camps this week, Michael Thomas still unsigned. Be very interesting to see if that changes in the next couple of weeks.
I mean, I anticipate it will. There's so many guys out there who are kind of name players or have been name players in the past who are still unsigned. I would totally expect him to find a landing spot at some point, unless his Twitter diatribe after he got released is scaring teams off. I just doubt that's actually true. I mean, it probably did to some respect, but at some point somebody's going to get hurt. Yeah. And somebody's like, well, this guy's a former All-Pro receiver who played well enough when he was healthy last year. So
not going to be the Saints, though. Will not be the Saints.
No, it won't be the Saints. 31 other teams, though, might take a shot at him.
Yeah. Matt, position battle, you're checking out.
I'll be really interested to see what happens at safety between Jonathan Abram and Jordan Howden. It feels like Abram was maybe the front runner for, at least in base, once it's nickel. I could see a scenario where Abram technically wins the job, but Howden gets most of the playing time. But I'm just kind of interested to see how that position shakes out. And, speaking of guys left unsigned, Justin Simmons. I don't think Justin Simmons is coming here, but are they going to add to that position at all? How do they feel about that spot? I think that's one of those spots that I think could get some clarity in camp.
Yeah. I also want to throw out linebacker. That was going to be the other one I brought up. Pete Werner, I think, is probably still their starting weak side linebacker, but they brought Willie Gay in for a reason, and it wasn't just to play 5 snaps a game as their Sam. I think he's going to be competing with Werner for the starting weak side linebacker job throughout this training camp, and Werner's got to go earn it. He was really solid his first 2 years, and he took a pretty big step back last year, especially in coverage.
Yeah, the way they split time there will be super fascinating. The other one I had linebacker, third wide receiver, and then backup quarterback was the other one I put on the graphic. We think Jake Haener has a hold on that right now, but Rod, could that change if Spencer Rattler has a good preseason?
I think it could, but I don't think it will. I think Jake Haener with his, he has an extra year of experience over Spencer, and just what we saw in training camp, it just looked like Jake Haener had kind of taken the reins on that job for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think also this scheme really fits what Haener does well. So I think Spencer Rattler would have had to take significant strides from where he was this summer, which is possible. He's a rookie. I think the only other one I'd throw out there is a number 2 running back. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara. He might report with the team right away. We don't know for sure, but you can envision a scenario where it's a week or 2 weeks where he's not there, and that's going to be really important for Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams to showcase who deserves that number 2 spot. Number 1 in the event Alvin Kamara never shows up or gets traded or whatever. And I think right now I would kind of handicap it as it's Jamal Williams slightly ahead of Kendre Miller, but if he can show some of that burst that we all kind of expect out of him and that he's a fit in this offense, I think he could overtake Jamal during training camp.
Good spot to transition there as you watch the Saints Insider podcast for Monday, July the 22nd. We're doing a training camp preview, and I think maybe the thing just random Saints fan is most looking forward to at training camp and watching clips and things like that in preseason games is how Klint Kubiak's offense is going to look. We saw glimpses of it in minicamp and OTAs as they installed it. How much do we expect to see in training camp, and how much different will things look for that average fan just tuning in?
I mean, I think even in the first preseason game when they're running vanilla offense, it's still going to look incredibly different. I think the core, like, foundational elements of this offense, while generally speaking across the NFL, foundational offense is roughly the same. You're going to see a lot of parts of this offense that you just haven't seen in Saints offenses in the past, with like a lot of motion, a lot of unique motion. You're talking about like putting Rashid Shaheed in the backfield and doing the orbit motion back out into the slot and stuff like that. I think it's going to look different after the snap too. So even if it's going to be just like their basic run-of-the-mill offense, you're going to see a different style of offense, a lot more movement with the quarterback, with play actions and bootlegs and whatnot. It's going to look really different. Like, will it be good? I don't know. But it's going to be a lot different. I think it's going to be exciting.
It's going to look good.
I think different is good for Saints fans and for the Saints. They need something different.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it for the last, 2 or 3 years. So, yeah, they definitely need something different, and they're going to get something different. And, again, it's a matter of how effective it is, but it will look different, noticeably different.
As for when fans can see it, there's an interesting wrinkle about this camp is that when we're in California, fans aren't going to be there. So normally for training camp, how it works is media is not allowed to film like the actual 11-on-11 thing, but normally you have these videos kind of leak on Twitter and stuff because fans are just shooting it and they don't know media policy rules. So like we get all these practice clips up on Twitter, but that's probably not going to happen this year. So you're going to actually have to wait until the actual preseason to see how the Saints offense is different. Because we've been seeing it. I mean, it already looks completely different from even OTAs and mandatory minicamp, but for when the fans are actually going to see it, I think they're going to have to wait till the preseason.
Yeah, and even then, as Luke said, could be a vanilla version of it when they play the Arizona Cardinals and San Francisco 49ers. And joint practices against the 49ers will be interesting as well. I find it fascinating. Dennis Allen basically has turned everything on that side of the ball over to Klint Kubiak and his staff and said, I need you to fix this. I need it to be better. How much should we expect them? I mean, is it reasonable to expect a full install by the end of camp? Are they still going to be learning throughout the season? What is the expectation for what they get done during camp?
You going to tackle that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think to have, like, they install new plays over the course of the season as they see what other teams are doing and those sorts of things. But they'll have their base foundational offense in place, ready to go in week one. I mean, they've already installed during the spring, and now they restall it again. So there are like steps to this and how they do it. But to your point, I mean, Dennis Allen is basically trusting his job with Klint Kubiak, and that's kind of what this year is about for the Saints. I think is how successful can Kubiak be bringing this new offense to New Orleans. He's been a coordinator before in Minnesota, but he only got 1 year to do it because that staff was fired at the end of the year. So it's a lot is riding on it, but I think there's reasons for optimism. My question is, just so many of these teams around the league are running a version of this offense. You can't all have a top 10 offense if there are 20 teams or 17 teams, running a version of the scheme. So you're going to have to rely on execution. You're going to have to be sharp. You're going to have be accountable. That's something that Dennis Allen has really talked about with this new staff, is how accountable they are and how much they pay attention to the details. And we'll see if that stuff actually, trickles over.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, a lot's on the line, Rod, for Dennis Allen, but Klint Kubiak also, as Matt mentioned, has only had 1 year as an offensive coordinator, and that staff got fired. If the Saints don't do well this year and Dennis Allen is out the door, Klint Kubiak's probably not keeping his job here either. So it's an interesting risk he really bet on himself to come here and say, I can fix this.
Yeah. I think he will keep his job if the offense does well. And the offense could do well and the defense may struggle and the team still may do bad. So, if Dennis Allen's gone, I don't know, that makes it tough on Kubiak. And for me, we talk about Kubiak, I still think a lot of how effective he is going to depend on how effective the offensive line is. If they're not good, his scheme may be good, but if the line's no good, the scheme's not going to look good. So I just think all that kind of factors into it. So at the end of the season, I mean, you have to look at all these different pieces and figure out what went wrong in this if something goes wrong.
And that to me is the biggest challenge Kubiak is facing right now is that when you see a lot of these like, let's call them Shanahan schemes, specifically the Kyle Shanahan scheme, and you see a lot of the branches. A lot of those teams don't have elite offensive lines, right? Miami has Teron Armstead, who's we all know is a very good player, but you can maybe only count on him being there for 10 or 11 games a year. San Francisco has
Trent Williams,
but I don't think a lot of top of the line offensive linemen outside of that. Houston had Laramie Tunsil, not a lot of top of the line offensive linemen outside of that. I think the scheme, the infrastructure of the offense can cover up some of the weaknesses with the offensive line, and the Saints definitely have weaknesses on the offensive line. Now, it doesn't matter on 3rd and 13. No, you can't scheme up like pass protection and one-on-one battles, but I think that they can. That's been one of the proven successes of this specific offense is you don't have to have studs all the way across the board. The scheme, the infrastructure of the offense kind of takes care of that a little bit, and that's going to be really, really, really important for Kubiak to nail that this year, because that is clearly. Just from a talent standpoint, from an experience standpoint, is the weakest part of this team. And they're going to go nowhere if their offensive line doesn't function within this offense.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we mentioned it earlier, and kind of related to this topic is Matt's story on Dennis Allen and how he's really tried to change his attitude. It's absolutely worth reading. Go check it out, NOLA.com/Saints, published just this morning.
Really good story.
It delves into a lot of what DA has actually done specifically, Matt, to try to change the way he coaches.
Yeah, and I think when writing this story, I tried to be careful with, so many coaches try to say they've reinvented themselves. Like you look at Josh McDaniels going into Las Vegas. I've learned from Denver. Well, he's still fired after 2 seasons. Apparently players still hated him. I don't think Dennis Allen is approaching it here saying, I'm a new man, look at how I've changed. But the Family Feud anecdote that I mentioned earlier kind of just came up naturally in the sense of conversation. Like I went into that story thinking I was going to be writing about continuity and how Dennis Allen's staff is all different. And it kind of turned into a completely different idea because of just what DA brought up naturally. And so I do think there are things he's recognized that he's looked at in the situation that hasn't been working. And something Tyrann Mathieu told me was that, going into this, players have now been around DA a lot, and so some of that same old message can get tiresome, can get boring, and I think this is kind of a way to switch things up. And whether it's having an impact on players, I mean, Tyrann Mathieu said that he noticed teammates saying that DA's cool now. Now you can roll your eyes at that, but it's interesting to see how he's being perceived. I think a little bit differently, at least among the players.
When I read that story, I kind of thought back to last year because I remember writing a sort of a similar. I mean, it didn't go into the details. I mean, you had all the Family Feud and all that stuff, and I don't know if DA had all the fun stuff, but I think even last year, it seems like he tried to make a change from year 1 going into year 2. Like he was trying to be a little bit more assertive. I remember players saying, "Yeah, he's a little more assertive now," and like being a little bit more demanding. So I think to DA's credit, I mean, he is doing some self-reflecting and trying to work on the things that he didn't think he did well the year before. So, I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But I have noticed that, in all 3 years, he's tried to make these steps.
Yeah, and I think another point of the story that I tried to get across, or just a general takeaway, is we're now headed 3 years without Sean Payton in town, and this offseason was really about maybe putting that final kibosh, in it, just trying to, getting rid of Pete Carmichael, distancing themselves from Sean Payton, because that's always going to loom over Dennis Allen, is he's going to be the coach that will replace Sean Payton in town. People have mixed feelings about Dennis Allen. Like it's that I think it's best for him if you just kind of somewhat push that to the side or try to be your own man. And by bringing in Klint Kubiak, he said absolutely. That was kind of like an example of that. He agreed with the premise. So
yeah, and I mean, that's all true. He's going to be in Peyton's shadow until he starts winning on his own.
Right.
And that's really the question, Luke, is like, how much can a Tiger change his own stripes? I mean, last year was Dennis Allen's first winning season as a head coach, and it came against a historically easy schedule. Can he do better than that against a slightly tougher schedule? I mean, that attitude change is great and all that. We've got to see results.
Yeah, and I think the biggest and most important change he makes, I think it's good that he's doing he's trying to be a little bit looser, a little bit more fun. They're still doing the like team slogans. This last year was big team, little me, and now it's smart, tough, competitive. Right? They're still doing all that stuff. But I think the most important thing to me, the biggest change he made, was that he's just like, that offense was no good. And it took 2 years to get to that point and to that realization. And you can argue that they should have made that realization after the first season. But they invested all the money in Derek Carr. They've got high draft picks in that offense, and it was massively, wildly, frustratingly inconsistent. And you saw solutions that were just never taken advantage of. Hey, we saw them as members of the media with much less football knowledge, right? So his biggest, smartest, most important change was to completely wipe the offensive slate clean, go out and get somebody from a tree with proven success in the NFL and let him run it. And not be this like overlord head coach who says my way or the highway and everything that I say goes. It's to basically go out and get a head coach at the offense and be like, run the show.
And I think it was important for him too to not be fooled by the last 5 weeks. That was something that I brought up to him, was that, like, you could have easily been tempted by how that went to keep it. He's like, I could, but when I looked at it whole, like, I determined we needed significant change. And I do think that inconsistency that you just brought up is a great point, because those 5 weeks, like, they could have masked everything, but you got to look at the entire picture, and they were just way too inconsistent across the board.
Right. It's hilarious looking back at the final statistics from last year offensively. Sort of like top 9 in scoring, top 11 or 12 in total offense. Derek Carr's overall efficiency numbers are really good, like completion percentage, passer rating, all that stuff. You're like, oh, what was the problem with the offense? And so you're like, well, 10 of those games were truly bad, and 6 of them were truly exceptional. And a lot of the numbers were built up when you're trying to claw out of a 20-point deficit. So you can't. I love numbers. I love statistics. But those statistics from last year's offense were just so completely misleading, and they made absolutely the right call to go out and just try to get this thing to be a functional 2024 NFL offense.
Well, look, I think it will be interesting to see how Dennis Allen relates to players. If you see a difference in training camp, I mean, we have obviously seen a little bit of mini camp and OTAs. Ultimately, I think you're right. That's not the most important thing. He's got to fix what's on the field. And so as we continue on the Saints Insider podcast, hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I want to talk about Dennis Allen's defense, too, because his defense, which has been perennially thought of as a top 10, if not top 5 unit in the NFL since, I guess, 2017, finished 13th last year, speaking of these rankings. And I think it slipped as the year went on. I think it was top 10 after, maybe around Thanksgiving, and slipped.
You got to remember, they didn't allow a touchdown until the 8th quarter of the season.
Yeah. And
then they didn't allow one in Green Bay until the 4th quarter. So really, the first 11 quarters of the season, they allowed 1 touchdown last year. They looked great to start the season.
And we're talking about a truly bad schedule that was made worse by you didn't have to face starting quarterbacks with Indianapolis, with
Chicago,
Minnesota, New York. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence was supposedly banged up when he played. You caught every break you could catch, and still this defense slipped. We all know it's aging. We all know that it's injury prone. To me, Rod, you mentioned this earlier. That might be just as big of a question as the offense is. Can the defense hold on to what it had been the previous 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all probably agree the secondaries, especially corners, are really good. My concerns are up front. And I think even in training camp, like, I don't know if we're going to know how good this defensive front is because we don't know how good the offensive front is. So they're going against each other, and we don't know if is the defense looking good because the offensive line is bad or vice versa. So I don't think we're going to really know anything about them until the actual season starts. But to me, it is a question mark. I mean, they got some guys that are banged up now and already. So, yeah, that's definitely a concern for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they can be a really, really good defense if their front takes a huge step forward. If Cam Jordan gets back to being healthy and he's the player that we saw 2 years ago versus last year. If Brian Brzee takes a step forward. If Chase Young comes in and is like really like a valuable contributor on this team, they could be good. They could be really good. But like their front was a source of a lot of their problems last year. Their tackles were really bad stopping the run. Even though the Saints like overall like advanced metrics kind of like their run defense, their tackles were not part of that. And their overall numbers were more reflective of that. I think they were like 21st in the NFL in rush defense. And then they have to figure out how to get after the passer again. I mean, that was like the foundational part of those like top 5 defenses that Dennis Allen had. They were like every year 45, 50, 55 sacks. And last year they were like 33, 36, something like that. So like they need to get those two elements of their defense right, because they're not going to be able to just rely on these statistics that are historically hard to repeat. Turnovers, they were top 3 in the NFL in turnovers last year. Third down defense, I think they were like 5th in the NFL last year. And those two statistics, high degree of variance every year. So like they can't just count on picking off a bunch of passes and forcing a bunch of fumbles, because 2 years ago they might have been a playoff team, but they couldn't force a turnover. They forced it was something like 6 or 7 turnovers in the first like 14 weeks of the season. So it's like high degree of variance there. They have to get better at the stuff that they can actually control being good at, and that's run defense and getting after the passer.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of the case of why the defense won't fall off or be just as good. I think, one, the overall talent is still pretty strong. I don't know if the age drop-off will happen this year. It could, but you could also make an argument for a guy like Cam Jordan having a bounce-back season or a bounce-back-ish season with, say, 5 sacks. That would be an improvement over what he's been. I think the thing for me is they can cut down on the explosive plays. I think that's something manageable that they could easily improve on. Or I think when the defense started to really slide last year, you look at the Los Angeles game, they just gave up so many big plays. If they can just limit those, and I think the secondary will be a little bit more sound if Marshawn Lattimore is able to stay healthy, Paulson Adebo building on the year he had last year, if the safeties can hold up. Like I do think there's a scenario where they can kind of cut down on the big plays, and that'll help limit maybe if they do regress a little bit on, they don't force as many turnovers. Maybe that'll even out and they'll still be a top 10-ish defense. But yeah, I mean, I think the pass rush too is really important. They're going to need someone to step up there.
Well, and look, their biggest free agent signing was Chase Young. To me, he's a huge part of this. If he's healthy and if he can step in and be productive, man, what a difference that would make. Because it's not just explosive plays, but they weren't creating enough negative plays on early downs to where they could really kind of force the offense's hand either. And if they get more of that, then maybe that solves both problems.
Yeah. I mean, the big negative plays outside of turnovers just weren't there for them last year. It was remarkable. They were as good as they were on third down, and that was probably, thanks to the strength of their team, which was the secondary. But they need to be disruptive. I mean, those were those really good Saints defenses from like 18 to 21, really disruptive defenses. Interior disruption, edge disruption, well-timed blitzes, and that just was not a part of the conversation last year.
Speaking of Chase Young, how soon do we expect to see him in full contact?
Well, he's going to start the year on PUP, right? Mm-hmm. So,
Start training camp, at least.
yeah, sorry. So, I don't know, a week?
Yeah, I mean, it could just depend. And
He might be
Just-
off PUP by the time we get out there.
And even though if he gets off PUP, there's still the step of, all right, now he's practicing an individual, but when is he doing contact? Like, they're going to have to gradually be careful with this. Like, when he suffered that stinger, which I believe is like the root of all these neck problems for him
Where was he
last
playing?
year. What? They played in Cleveland? Oh,
Who did?
Oh, they played in
He
Washington.
had to tee him up. We hadn't had one yet.
yes.
Yes.
I don't
So-
care.
so-
It's going to be my last time hitting that for like a month.
Bring it with you.
Yeah, just do it on the plane. That'll really ease passengers. Anyway, so it took him like a month to. It took him like 2 weeks to even get back on the practice field, and then like when he was back, they still weren't doing contact, and then he missed the first game. So I mean, neck's a tricky injury. He had surgery to address it. He's coming along fine, but I've written a lot of Chase Young injury updates over the years, and that's not probably going to
What
stop.
would be a great sign to see him in a preseason game, because that means they feel like he's healthy enough to get out there and take a hit. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's where we really look. All right, I want to wrap things up as we do our training camp preview here. Next time you see these guys, they'll be out in California in our rental house doing shows out there. So
Maybe we'll do a show live from the beach.
We should have had our house company sponsor this pod, so we could have
maybe
gotten
save
the
some money on
hookup.
it. Yeah.
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 We're not going to name them because they aren't. So
Rental houses in Southern California are not cheap, as it turns out. All right, just to wrap up, and it could be something that y'all have mentioned so far. It could be something that hasn't been mentioned. What's the one thing you really want to learn out of these next 3-4 weeks here? Whoever's ready can start.
Learn.
I'll start. We've talked so much about the offensive line, and it comes back to me for Trevor Penning. It's just, is he? Are they going to trust him? Are they going to what is Ollie? Where does Ollie Udo line up? I feel like I've been waiting for months to see it. Is he going to be a guard? Is it going to be a right tackle, left tackle? Where they line him up, I think, will say a lot about how they feel about Penning or Fuanga, and so I don't know, but he's the piece we haven't really seen yet, and I just need to see it, and I'm curious of that.
I don't know if this is a learn actually, but something you're actually learning. But I am curious about this Alvin Kamara situation, just how long it's going to play out, or if it's going to play out long at all. They may have this worked out before we get there. But if it lingers, I think it can kind of start to be a little concerning if it lingers a little too long. But that's going to be for me. That's the one thing. I know it's not really.
No, I mean, I think
No,
it's a huge storyline. Yeah, for
I
sure.
named Ollie Udo. You named the franchise running back. I think objectively you're correct.
I want to know what the hell they're going to do with this $6 million of Taysom Hill's contract they restructured into next year. You know, like there's a 0% chance they did that just for
The Saints don't leave themselves cap
S's,
room.
S's and G's.
Yeah.
You know, there's no chance. Yeah, I mean they're already in a situation where they need to trim a bunch of money from next year's cap to be cap compliant. So like, they didn't do that for no reason. They've got to have somebody in mind or a couple players in mind where they needed an additional $6 million in cap room, and it's not because they're going to re-sign somebody from their own roster, because that money, the first year, that money's never a huge impact on the cap. So like, what is that for? Who is that for? I'm really interested to find out. And if they don't do anything with it, I think they're opening themselves up for a lot of criticism there. It's like that's just weird accounting.
Yeah, which is not something they do. I mean, they have this MO, and that goes against it if they don't. Yeah,
They have a plan. I'm not gonna. I mean, I just talked about it, but like, I don't think I'm gonna have to be in a position where I'm criticizing Guy Harley. Everything that they do cap-wise is thought out. So there's got to be something that they're anticipating doing with that money.
All right, that's going to do it for our show. That's our training camp preview for 2024. As I said, next time you see these guys, they'll be in California doing shows, and we'll shoot them out to you from out there. So follow us, tell your friends about us as training camp starts. One-stop shop for all your information here on the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube page, also at NOLA.com/Saints. And NOLA.com/subscribe will get you ready for the new season if you want to follow all these guys' work. For our producer, Norman Bell, he's Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, Matthew Paris. I'm Zach Ewing, and we'll see you next time on the Saints Insider.